When we drove the all-new Tata Punch right before its market launch, well, it completely bowled us over. For Tata has created a product that's complete in every respect. However, the only downer was that Tata went ahead and launched it at a very optimistic pricing. Well, yes, the Punch, it is quite expensive for the segment it's competing in. But more importantly, what that sort of pricing has done is that it has brought it very close to its sibling, the premium hatchback that Tata has on offer, which is the Altroz. Of course, the Altroz on paper comes across as a more value for money product. It is a bigger car, it is a hatchback, a premium one at that. It has a couple more features. It has a more powerful engine as well. This one gets a turbo, whereas this comes with a naturally aspirated engine. So when you see both these cars parked right next to each other at a Tata dealership, well, of course, it's the Altroz that will make more sense to you. But is it really the case? Is the Punch really overpriced? Or does it have an ace up its sleeve as compared to its sibling? Well, that's what we are here to find out on this cold, dreary and rainy day.
You're watching the AutoX YouTube channel. You can also get your daily dose of all things automotive on our website, autox.com, and follow us on social media. Don't forget to check out our monthly magazine and make sure to hit the bell and subscribe button so you don't miss a thing.
The Altroz has been around for a while, and this is the time that it has got an I-turbo motor. And of course, that means it has a turbocharged engine, and it produces, it's the same 1.2 liter engine like the Punch and the naturally aspirated Altroz. But this one gets a turbocharger, and of course, the power figure has bumped up. So this one produces 108 bhp and 140 Newton meters of torque. Now, of course, it has a lot of power, but the torque is not that much. And of course, this engine, well, when you're driving it, it's quite refined, it revs quite freely, and it has ample performance. The thing is, it doesn't actually feel like a turbo. The power delivery is very linear. Right from 1500 RPM, you have the turbo spooling, and it feels very linear all the way up to 5500 RPM. Now, 5500 RPM is where it develops its peak power, and it's also where the engine redlines. So as soon as you hit 5500 RPM, well, it cuts off the power. So that is quite weird because you are riding that surge, and the moment the engine starts coming into its element, I mean, in the sense you have this surge from 4000 RPM above, but 5000 RPM, it just comes to an abrupt end. So that's quite weird in the way how the power delivery is, in the sense like if you're looking for performance. But everyday driving, well, it is quite phenomenal in the way it drives. It has great drivability. Like I said, the torque delivery right from the bottom end all the way up to 5000 RPM, it's quite linear, and it feels ready for every occasion. Part throttle inputs, quick overtakes, well, this motor is always ready for all occasions. So in terms of drivability, yes, it is clearly ahead of the Punch. Now this one also comes with two driving modes. It has City and Sport. So in City, the performance is subdued, as in I did the acceleration run, and in City mode actually it was more or less the same as the Punch. So this did 0 to 100 in 15.6 seconds in this weather, whereas in Sport mode, which is where all the performances, it did it in 12 odd seconds. So that's about it in terms of performance. Of course, it's a lot quicker than the Punch, but then it doesn't feel that thrilling. It's quite linear, and it's not a hot hatchback in that sense. In terms of engine refinement also, I think this is a noisier unit because at idle, you can actually feel that 3-cylinder thrum, especially during cold starts. It is quite noisy, and you can feel the whole car shaking during cold starts. The Punch, well, actually it does a slightly better job in that regard. It is thrummy like a 3-cylinder engine, but then it's not as loud as this one. Now, where the Altroz feels better than the Punch is in the way it feels, because this definitely is a more premium car. It has a lot more premium bits, in the sense the leather wrapped steering wheel feels nicer to hold. The plastics and everything in here it feels more premium. And importantly, it also comes with physical knobs for volume control and these quick buttons, which is not the case with the Punch. So in terms of practicality also, it is slightly better than the Punch. And of course, there is also this armrest here at front. It is quite low, but again, it is there, unlike the Punch, which doesn't get it. And I also think the seats are much nicer because they come with this leatherette elements, so it feels nicer, it feels more comfortable, and it feels, of course, more premium as well. In terms of ergonomics, well, of course, this is also a comfortable car, and it also gets a dead pedal, which is not the case with the Punch.
When it comes to the rear seat space and comfort, it's the Altroz that has a clear advantage. There is more legroom and it also feels more spacious and airier. Not to mention, rear passengers also get AC vents, which are missing in the Punch. In addition to that, the boot space is also more. The Altroz's trunk has a capacity of 366 litres, whereas the Punch's has 345 litres.
Now, coming to the most important bit is the ride and handling. This is one area where the Altroz absolutely shines. But then when you drive it back to back with the Punch, and I'll tell you later like how it compares with the Punch. But in isolation, I think this is a very decent car. The ride quality is brilliant. It's quite absorbent as well. But it does feel a little noisy over sharp bumps, especially at low speeds. The other thing is, of course, at high speeds, the stability is phenomenal. So this is one area where it trumps the Punch, because the Punch after 120 kilometers per hour, it doesn't feel as stable as the Altroz, whereas the Altroz, where it hugs the road when you're doing high triple-digit speeds. If you drive on the highways regularly, I think this is going to be better in that respect. Now, one thing that I didn't really like about this car is the steering, because it has a very inconsistent feel and it weighs up also in a very weird fashion. So when you're driving it fast, it doesn't quite weigh up. It feels quite dead at the center, and even when you're pushing the car hard around corners, it doesn't feel that hot hatchback sort of a thing. And that's quite a shame, because we know the chassis is so capable. This car, when you're driving it fast, it feels very capable, but the steering, it's not just in tune with what the chassis can do. So I think it needs refinement on that front. And I think in the Punch, Tata has actually found the solution for that, because that car definitely handles or steers better than this one. So the moment you step into the Punch after driving the Altroz, the first thing you notice is that it's indeed a compact car. So in terms of legroom, the way you sit in this car, of course, it's a bit tight. Having said that, in terms of headroom, this being a taller car, you get more space. And overall, of course, it feels a lot more spacious. And the cabin, the visibility is great all around. You're sitting quite high, so the overall visibility, it's quite good. Now, in terms of ergonomics also, I think the Punch is definitely better than the Altroz in terms of how everything falls in hand. Well, this feels definitely much better than the Altroz. Another thing is, of course, the engine. Well, this doesn't have a turbo, but there is a turbo coming. But for the time being, it only gets a single petrol engine option. Now, this one is a 1.2 liter engine. It is a 3-cylinder, just exactly the same specifications as the I-turbos, but it doesn't have a turbo. Now, this is a naturally aspirated unit, and it develops 85 bhp and 113 Newton meters of torque. Now, in terms of acceleration, well, of course, this is quite linear, this is quite progressive, and it doesn't have the punch of the Altroz, to be honest. But to be honest, it feels quite adequate. It revs really freely. It revs all the way up to 6,000 RPM. The Altroz has a rev limiter at 5,500 RPM, but this revs all the way up. But of course, after 5,000 RPM, you don't really get a lot of performance. But till there, well, it has actually more than enough grunt. Now, at low speeds, when you're driving it in city and the car is fully loaded, you can feel that it doesn't quite have that bottom end of the Altroz turbo. So you do struggle to pick it up, and there's a bit of a flat spot at around 3,000 RPM. But overall, honestly, I can't really complain about this engine, because Tata has actually mated it to perfection with this gearbox. The gear ratios are also quite nicely matched. The first 3 gears are quite short, but 4th, 5th, they're quite tall. So you can do close to 120 kilometers per hour in 3rd gear itself, and it does it quite efficiently. It's quite refined also. I have to say this is more refined than the Altroz's unit. Now, in terms of outright performance, of course, this is not that thrilling and it's not that fast also. In fact, if you check the acceleration runs that we did, of course, it's a bit damp today, it's raining, but it managed a 0 to 100 time in around 16 seconds. So that is quite slow, especially compared to the Altroz, which did it in 12 odd seconds. So, of course, in terms of numbers, the Altroz is better, but I can't really find a fault with this engine and gearbox, to be very, very honest. Now, where the Punch absolutely trumps the Altroz is actually in ride and handling department. Well, of course, you'd think the Altroz is a low-slung premium hatchback, so it might handle better. Well, of course, it is a great handler. It has a great balance. But then when you drive it back to back with this thing, well, this feels much better. The way the steering is tuned, it's very consistent, very linear. Whereas in the Altroz, it feels a little vague. But in this, it feels quite quick also. And this car has a shorter wheelbase, so it feels more agile in that sense as well. The suspension is also more pliant. And the ride, that's also quite well damped. Whereas the Altroz's suspension is a little crashy. Well, this thing feels more matured in the sense there is an underlying firmness in the way the suspension behaves, and it feels big car-like. It actually feels like an SUV, like something like a Nexon or a Harrier. So in terms of ride and handling balance, well, this being an SUV or this being a micro SUV, this being a jacked up hatchback, it still actually drives better than the Altroz. And for a lot of you, that may be surprising. But then I can back it up with numbers, because last month we had our anniversary test and we had both these cars at a racetrack. So we lapped both the cars, and this one, despite having a naturally aspirated unit, this lapped the Buddh International Circuit, the technical section of the circuit, faster than the Altroz. And that's primarily down to the way this car drives. The chassis it has, the way it has been tuned, the way it goes, the steering, all the components in this car, they work cohesively. Whereas the Altroz, despite it being a great car, there are a couple of niggles. There are bits that annoy you and they don't work so well together like it's in the Punch. Another thing that I want to point out is the tires in both these cars. Now, both cars have 195 section width tires. The Altroz has lower profile and this one has a high profile, of course. But this comes with better rubber, and this has Apollo Alnax, whereas the Altroz has surprisingly got MRF Eco Tread tires, which are green tires and they don't have a lot of grip. And in fact, when we were driving both these cars at the track, I still remember the Altroz was understeering all the way. Whereas this one, you just lock it in third gear, do 120 kilometers per hour, and it was the speed that I was doing. It just goes around corners beautifully. There is not much to complain. The chassis, the way it handles, the way it grips, the way it holds the road. Well, this is definitely a more refined version of the Altroz, very honestly. Yes, Tata started it with the Altroz, the whole chassis, the Alpha Arc thing. But this is where they've taken the game forward, and it actually shows because they've honed it, and this is the better version of that Altroz platform. So if I have to conclude this test, I'd say that the Altroz, well, of course, it's a more premium offering. It has more space, it has more equipment. It definitely feels like a more expensive car, and I also feel it is the better looking car of the two, because the way that car is designed, its sharp lines, it is definitely one of the best looking hatchbacks on the market today, if not the best. And of course, if you want more performance, the Altroz has an I-turbo engine, and it only costs around 50 to 60,000 more than the naturally aspirated version of the Punch. Of course, if you want more value for your money, well, it is hands down the Altroz that is the winner of this test. But for me personally, I think the Punch is the better product of the two. It has everything that the Altroz has in terms of equipment, in terms of safety ratings, in terms of how it feels on the road, but it does everything better. Like, the fundamentals are definitely better here. The way it drives, the way it handles, the way it brakes, the way it steers. Well, everything about this car is definitely much more better than the Altroz. And it's not just a marginal difference. You can feel that this platform has been evolved and it's been refined to the point that the Altroz actually feels quite old dynamically. Of course, it could do with a bigger engine, as in the turbo engine is going to come with this one as well. But then, of course, the prices will go up. And I think for day-to-day driving, well, this is absolutely perfect. But despite the fact that it doesn't have a powerful motor, overall, the way this car drives, the way this car feels, well, it is the more superior package of the two cars we have here. So whichever car you pick, of course, it's going to be a win-win for Tata. But personally, I think this is where Tata has absolutely knocked it out of the park. The Punch is an absolute winner in every sense.